It's time for Physician Family Finances, the show where physician moms and dads like you can get the answers and encouragement you need to turn a good earned income into great life outcomes for tomorrow and today.
Hello, physician moms and dads. I'm Nate Reineke, certified financial planner and primary advisor.
And I am Chelsea Jones, also a certified financial planner and primary advisor here at Physician Family.
Chelsea, unfortunately, the summer is over. I don't know if you could tell over there in Florida, but it is.
Yeah, it feels the same to me.
What was something fun you did this summer with the family?
Okay, in the summer we went to, which I talked about this a few episodes ago. We went to Disney for my daughter's birthday. She has a late September birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we went to Disney for a week to celebrate her birthday, and it was so much fun. It made
Yeah,
it was so fun to watch her experience Disney and like see it through her eyes.
it's like the
Because she
only
was,
way to do it.
yeah, she experienced all the magic and it made it
Yeah,
feel really magical for me. It was like I was tearing up like every other hour,
yeah.
just seeing how happy she was there.
I was sort of one of those people that was grumpy and against Disney before kids. I was like, I don't get it. And then once you have kids, you can take them there. You're like, oh, this is awesome.
This is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Any humbling experiences over the summer? Well, Anna, is she in preschool?
She's in Her class is called early preschool. She's only
Early
two,
preschool.
so
Only
she's
two.
still got a few years or a couple
Yeah.
years even before preschool. But
Okay. Any humbling experiences over the summer though?
first one that comes to mind, I feel like kids humble us all the time. It's like a daily thing.
Uh-huh.
But the first one that comes to mind is when we drive home from school. We usually have a little jam session
Yeah.
because she doesn't like being in the car, so I have to distract her somehow. And one time over the summer, I was singing to, it was probably Moana. She's been really into Moana.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hear her go, Mama, Mama, no. And I was like, what are you talking about? I thought we were singing along. She was like, no, Mama. I was
Yeah.
like, you don't want me to sing it? No.
No. No.
Like looking in the rearview mirror at her face.
That's
Like,
funny.
okay,
Yeah. Luckily I'm not a
thanks.
big singer, so my boys don't have to tell me no, but I've heard them tell my wife no. I had a humbling experience this weekend. And it was truly humbling.
Yeah.
My boys really like to wrestle, and my oldest, who's 7, he's getting bigger, more athletic, and so we wrestle, but they get kind of crazy. So we can no longer actually wrestle or like fight because they cannot help themselves but to start throwing kicks and punches. Like
Yeah.
it is impossible for them to do. So okay, there's absolutely no kicks, no punches. It's like push me off the mat sort of thing,
Hmm.
only pushing. And he caught me off guard and full blown like dropped the shoulder into me and got me off the mat like easily.
Oh.
And he's like, Dad, did you do that on purpose? And I'm thinking, unfortunately, no. You actually pushed me off the mat. So I was like, man, gotta hit the gym a little harder. Otherwise, he's only 7. What's gonna
Yeah.
happen when he's like 10?
Or stay prepared
Yeah,
the
that's
time.
right. Okay, we have some good questions today.
Mm.
Um, the first question we have is actually, I don't know what kind of doc it is, but it was from another webinar we did with Physician on Fire. So the question that I got after the webinar was, should I make a retirement budget or just use 80% of my current expenses when calculating how much I need to save? And I'm the budget guy. You love your budgets
Hmm.
too, but I really like budgeting, and we don't do it much because doctors don't really like to budget. But it's important to take one good hard look at your spending, right, when you're planning
Yeah.
for retirement. But you can just tell by the nature of this question, doctors don't really want to do a budget. They just want to do 80% or something like that. I don't think it
Hmm.
makes a ton of sense to do 80%. There are some studies out there that say you spend, on average, everyone spends 15 or 20% less, but that's the
Hmm.
average Joe. And the average Joe, they may not pay off their mortgage. They aren't paying high disability premiums. There's a lot of things that doctors act differently in their spending years than they do the average
Hmm.
person. So there's this, rule of thumb here. But, a lot of doctors too, they end up buying houses that too, if you follow these rules of thumb, might be a little out of range. Meaning they buy a
Hmm.
more expensive house, but they actually can afford it despite it kind of uh, running into these rules of thumb where you should, 20 or 25% of your income should be your house. And that is because they have a lot more discretionary income. So
Yeah.
if your thing is to buy a house and you're spending 30% of your income on it, but you don't spend a lot of money other than that, this rule doesn't make any sense, the 80% rule, because
Hmm.
you're going to pay off your house before you retire. At least, if you're Chelsea or Nate's client, you are,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it would be a really good idea to take a close look at all the things that you won't spend money on and be realistic. So pay off your house, no more disability insurance premiums, no more saving, no more kids in the house, things like that. And I
Hmm.
see all the time that spending is a lot lower than the 80% number.
Yeah. I was going to say using 80% of current expenses, especially if this is like your mid-career, you've had an attending salary for a few years. I can see 80% being an overestimate of retirement expenses most of the time.
Yeah.
And this is one of those rules of thumb where if you're really far from retirement and maybe not meeting with an advisor yet, but you're trying to figure out some kind of number. This is kind of like the equivalent of the 4% rule, like estimating
Exactly.
retirement numbers, where it gives you like a good starting point, maybe, but there's so much more that goes into figuring out the actual amount
Yes.
that at the end of the day, it just doesn't,
It doesn't
doesn't,
really, it's just, you could do better. And it's not
yeah.
that much work to do a lot better than that. I actually introduced the 4% rule in that webinar because that's just sometimes that's just the best you can do if you don't have fancy financial
Yeah, it's
planning
easy to
software.
grasp. Most people have heard of it before. It's
Yeah. And,
a good starting point.
if you used 80% and you use the 4% rule, at least you would have a target that you're working toward and it might work out okay. But this one doesn't require any software. It requires a spreadsheet and
Hmm.
some of your time. So no,
Yeah.
not 80%. I would actually calculate it out.
Especially if
Um,
you're closer to retirement. This becomes more and more important getting that number right whenever the closer you get
yes,
to retirement.
right. Yes. Because, you're 58. You're not going to make any major adjustments to retire. I don't see doctors do it. If they find out
Mhm.
they can't spend what they've been spending for the last 10 years, they just work longer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Next question is from a double doctor family in West Virginia. Both of us are at a university and have a retirement plan, with a mandatory
Mhm.
6% contribution. Is that 6% outside of the $23,500 limit for a 401k or other plans?
Yeah, this is a great question because going over that limit, if you were to go over that limit, that would be a big no-no, right?
Uh huh.
But this 23,500 limit, that's known as the elective deferral limit.
Mm hmm.
And the keyword there is elective. So this client is talking about a mandatory contribution to a retirement plan. So they're making you it's a
Mm
condition of employment to do the 6% contribution. By definition is not an elective deferral. So it wouldn't count towards the $23,500 elective deferral limit.
hmm. Mm hmm. Yeah, I love when this happens, right? You get to
Yeah.
put more money in there. In fact, I'm surprised I don't see it more. Maybe there's a good reason. I haven't looked into it, but um, a lot of employers will use 457s or some other plan that maybe isn't as good as your 401k, but they're just trying to help you save more for retirement. When if they did
Hmm.
this mandatory contribution, that would solve it. There's probably a good reason they don't, but we do see it a lot at these big institutions, especially in academia.
Yeah, I see the mandatory contribution a lot with state schools. Like this is
Hmm.
part of a university system. That's
Yep.
where I see it the most.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So, an emergency medicine doc in Tennessee. I'm only a 1099 employee. I guess I should say all their income is 1099. and contract with hospitals. Is it worth it to set up an LLC or S Corp if that would be better for us than a sole proprietorship? Some of the other doctors I work with have those and they pay their wives a salary. Yes, it is worth it. That's the short answer. I touched
Mhm.
on this quite a bit in the last episode. The S Corp is what makes, being, I mentioned in the last episode, being 1099, there's nothing magic about that, right? If you're a 1099 employee and you're a sole proprietorship or you don't do the right thing with that 1099 income, you probably won't save much in taxes. But if you set up, an LLC and you have a tax as an S corp, then you do have the opportunity to save quite a bit in taxes. And that is because when you pay yourself a salary, you have this 15.3% payroll tax. And
Mhm.
so you pay your 15.3%. This is what you would pay half of this if you were an employee, and then your employer would pay half of it. And since you are an employee of your S corp, you do have to pay yourself something. You pay yourself what is known as a reasonable salary, and you do pay that 15.3%. You can't get around it entirely because the IRS has some rules that you must pay yourself a reasonable salary. But let's imagine you made $500,000 a year and your tax professional determined that $200,000 a year was a reasonable salary, right? So the rest of it, the 300,000, you can pay yourself as distributions, but only if you set up the S corp. And those distributions skirt around 0.3% payroll tax.
Mhm.
So quite a bit. I mean, a couple hundred, few $100,000, 15.3% of that is a lot, right? So certainly worth it. You just have to be careful. I mean, you don't want to set up a really low salary, and you do have some more complexity with an S corp. You have to set up payroll and do bookkeeping and tax filings, but you're going to do a lot of that work. You should be doing a lot of that work anyways if you're self-employed.
Mhm.
As far as the paying your spouse, so the important thing to know is that when you pay your spouse, they have a salary, and so you are paying that self-employment, or you're paying that payroll tax to your
Which
spouse.
is also 15.3 is sometimes called the self-employment tax.
Yes. So, no, you should probably do some math to see if that's worth it. But the reason you would do it is so that they could take part in your retirement plan. So they can
Mhm.
defer most of the salary that you get. When you pay them $50,000 and they're deferring most of it, into maybe a little less than half of it into 401k or something, then that's a good move, right? You're deferring all the taxes on it, and you pay that payroll tax on a chunk of it as well. The part that, my red flags go up when people are just doing it to do it. They
Mhm.
need to actually be doing real work, right? I see
Yeah.
a lot of tax tips where you're paying your children, you put your children on payroll and all that, and they're not really doing anything. They need to actually be doing work. Your spouse needs to actually be doing work. It could be admin work, bookkeeping, scheduling, things like that. Track your hours, track your duties so that if you ever get audited, you have a real case because it's real. They're actually working. And then you have to run them through your payroll. So, if that pencils out and it's all worth it, then yeah, you can hire your spouse if they have a legitimate job.
Yeah. And this is something that your tax preparer can help you with. They can prepare a projection, pencil out how much you would save in taxes if it's a net positive if to the spouse. I've worked with CPAs that have done that for clients before. So there's ways to run the numbers with your CPA to go in informed before you make that
Yes.
decision.
Agreed. Yeah, and we it's not all that exciting, but we talk all the time about the complexity of all this. Sometimes if it's a
Hmm.
little bit of savings, but it's more complex, you know, move on. Do something else with your time. But if
Yeah.
it's not that hard and they are doing work for you, then you
Hmm.
should take the benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, next question's from an anesthesiologist in New York. Earmuffs. If you got kids in the car, I know some of our listeners have kids in the car, but this was a
This
fiery
is a
question.
direct quote.
Yeah, direct quote. I have a whole life policy and it seems I have a loan on it. I'm pretty pissed at the broker who sold it to me. I had no clue that this would happen. What do I do now? So, a lot of physicians end up in this spot.
Hmm.
They get stuck with these whole life policies and they never really understood them when they first bought them, and then they just discover at some point that there's a loan against it. And how that usually happens is early in your career, some financial professional, I'm putting my fingers up in air quotes, YouTube people can
Mhm.
see it, but people listening, financial professional, someone in a nice suit, is kind of selling you this idea of building wealth and protecting your family with this whole life policy. But what they don't mention is that they're about to make one of the biggest commissions out there
Mhm.
in the financial services industry. So they leave that part out. So you buy it, you're paying your premiums, fast forward a few years, and what happens is if the policy doesn't perform like you were told it would perform, and the premiums are high, uh, eventually a loan gets put against it. And it's not a loan like a regular bank loan. A lot of times you don't even really realize it's happening. It's an insurance company lending you money and using your own cash value in that policy as collateral. And there's interest being charged on it. And if you don't pay that interest in cash, it just adds to the balance. So if you're kind of asleep at the wheel, it can get worse and worse. And over time, the loan grows, sort of eating away at your cash value, eating away at your death benefit. And then if that gets big enough, the policy can collapse and the IRS would treat that unpaid loan as taxable income. Okay, so these policies on the surface, it's like they sound pretty good, but when you
It
dig
get
into
real
them,
messy.
they
Yeah.
get messy and they get, I mean, just nasty. So the question is, how do you kind of untangle this mess? And
Mhm.
most of the time, when this is being sold to you early on, the policies aren't absurdly large. That's what we usually see, but it just feels slimy and gross. And even if you are paying $1,000 a month, that's not nothing. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And this that just so happens to be roughly the premium that this person is paying. So how do you untangle it? First thing you need to look into, and who, by the way, who cares if this salesperson knows that you're plotting to get out of this thing? Don't let that
Right.
uncomfortable conversation sway you away from moving in the right direction, right? You're pissed at them.
Yeah.
Be pissed. Ask for the information you need. Okay. So you're asking for a cost basis. You need to know what you've paid into the policy versus what it's actually worth. And then that kind of can inform your next move. If your basis is really low, meaning the policy has grown beyond what you've paid into it, you can consider exchanging the policy into a low cost annuity. An annuity is also a bad word most of the time. In our, when we're giving advice, we're hearing people buying stuff, but it's just a lesser bad thing, right? So if you
Mhm.
have a really low basis and you just cancel the policy, then you're going to pay taxes on the gain.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to pay a bunch in taxes, let's say it's a really large policy, which I'm also looking at right now with a different client, it's a really
Mhm.
large policy, it's just not worth it. But there are some great low cost annuities that you can put your money into for almost nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
I was looking into a new product. It looks almost too good to be true. And I vetted it and it looks like it is true. So you can get
Mhm.
into these different policies. They make these different types of annuities that don't have large fees for this reason, to get you
Yeah.
out of a nasty policy. So that is an option. It's a bit more complicated, but it's not too bad. Now, if your basis is really high and you can get out, cancel this policy, take your cash value and run, then you should just do that, right? You're going to
Yeah.
cancel it. You've already paid mostly all the fees. So, you kind of, it cost you some money in taxes, cost you some money to cancel it. But the reality is you kind of at this point need to gnaw your arm off to get it out of this trap.
Yeah. And figuring out that amount, I've learned you have to specifically ask for the cash surrender value,
Hmm.
because the cash value is different than the cash surrender value. The
Hmm.
cash surrender value is net of any surrender charges,
Hmm.
which, if this is a relatively new policy, there might still be surrender charges that
That's right.
apply. If you've
Yep.
held it for a long time,
Yeah.
cash value is probably the same. But
Agreed. Yeah. So it can be painful, but once you free yourself from that trap, you're kind of back in control. You take that cash, you
Mhm.
do something a lot better with it, even if it's just sticking it into a brokerage account. And I've seen a few of these this year. One, this is a whole life policy. I saw a variable universal life policy. And I'm happy to say they're becoming less and less common. I think people
Mhm.
are kind of getting smart to this whole deal, but not always the case. There's some really good salespeople out there. But, if you have your foot or your arm in this trap, you can call me, you can call Chelsea, and we don't earn any commissions. We don't sell any of these products. We don't sell any products. We just sell ourselves. That's it. It's a plan or a subscription. And you know that if we're recommending one of these low cost annuities, we don't get anything from it. So we're just going to
Yeah.
recommend what's best for you. Stop the bleeding and kind of move on to something else. All right. I'm off my soapbox. Okay. Last question. It's from a psychiatrist in West Virginia. We just moved and have about $50,000 left over from the sale of our previous home. Where is the best place to put this cash?
Yep. And this came from one of my clients. To give a little bit of context, there's a few places where they could put this cash, and they asked about them. They're like,
Hmm.
should I put it in my 529? Because we haven't really been able to fund that yet this
Ooh,
year.
that's a good
Car
idea.
loan, should I pay that off?
Yeah.
Should I defer more money into my workplace plan?
Yeah.
But
I th-
yeah.
I think there's there's got to be at least 10 different places you could put the money.
Hmm.
It's interesting that they have this money because and sometimes people it's kind of the new norm to make an offer on a house that is not contingent on you selling your old house.
Hmm.
And I hope that goes away. That's kind of a COVID thing. It used to be very normal to say I need to sell my house to buy a new one, but for whatever reason that's not the new norm anymore, and I imagine it will sway the other direction. Something they could do that's different than kind of what to do naturally with just when you have extra money would be they could attempt to put the 50,000 toward their new mortgage and do what's called a recast, which is you put the
Hmm.
50,000 toward the new mortgage, your mortgage company recasts the loan and it resets your payments. So if the payments are high and your interest rate is high, which interest rates are getting a little bit more manageable, but depending on what bank you use and when you bought the house, they might be in the mid sixes. It's not a foregone conclusion that you get in the mid sixes when you
Hmm.
invest. Your auto loan rate might be 3%. I don't know, but you could recast a loan if that's an option.
Hmm.
But what did you end up like? What were the things you considered? You said 529 investing.
Hmm.
Like, I'm kind of thinking like new house. A lot of people
Yeah.
put work into their new house.
Yeah, because they literally just bought their new house,
Mm-hmm.
um, and moved states. So some of the places that I considered was, or my initial recommendation was pay off your car loan because it was at 7%, and then put the rest into your child's 529 to catch up on the contributions for this year. But after meeting with them and finding out a little bit more, I changed my recommendation and recommended that they instead defer more into their workplace plan because they switched jobs partway through the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out, we found out after digging into, one of her accounts that she hadn't maxed out her workplace plan at her old job. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that she would only have a portion of the 23.5 to contribute before the end of the year. Um, and she had the full 23.5 to contribute.
Ah,
So I recommended that she kind of keep that in cash and use it for their living expenses so that way they could defer more into their FB and
yeah.
reduce their taxable income.
That's interesting because normally, I'm very high on putting money into 529s, right? Because tax-free growth and
Hmm.
all that. But when you are not putting money into a workplace plan or your IRAs or something, like you only get one 2025.
Yeah.
You can't go back and say, well, now I have extra money. I'm going to put money in the year that I missed it. This is
Yeah.
it. You get 1 year. With fines, that's not the case. You can play catch up with fines. So I like that. And then by the end of all this, there's a pretty high likelihood that they have some money left over because they're saving all the taxes from that contribution.
Hmm.
So, it's not always best to take your cash and just, fire it all out there and do it really quickly. You can take it slow. And in a
Hmm.
few months, if they have extra money, then they put in their 529. That's good. Okay. And I think that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you liked this show, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out when we release new episodes every Wednesday. And you can leave this episode a rating wherever you're listening. I'd really appreciate that. And if you'd like to work with us, you can go to physicianfamily.com, schedule an interview. If you're not ready for that, we are still taking questions. We get questions all the time from clients, but I'd love to hear from the listeners as well. And even if it doesn't make it on the air, we will promise to answer your questions via an email. So until next time, remember, you're not just making a living, you're making a life.
Are you ready to turn worries about taxes and investing into all the money you need for college and retirement? It's time to make a plan and get on track. To find out if we're a match, visit physicianfamily.com and click Get Started. Or you can ask a question of your own by emailing podcast@physicianfamily.com. See marketing disclosures at physicianfamily.com/disclosures.